Thank you. Morning, everybody. As Craig said, wherever you are joining us from, and it sounds like across Canada, and we have no doubt up and down Alberta today, thank you for joining us. And just to reiterate, if it's your first time here, feel free to use the chat. The chat kind of takes off on its own. So if you do have a specific question for Kevin or one of us, then the Q&A is the icon to the left or a couple to the left from your chat button, depending what version of Zoom you have. Before we get going this morning, as always, it is very important for us to recognize where we are meeting. And so for Craig and I, we're based in Calgary. You just heard that Kevin was joining us from Edmonton. So here in Calgary, SAIT acknowledges that it is situated on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, which encompasses our Indigenous people of the Treaty 7 region. And I hope I'm not wrong, but I think that the Edmonton area is Treaty 6. In Treaty 7, we have the Siksika, the Piikani, the Kainai, the Tsuut'ina, the Stoney Nakoda, and the Northwest Métis homeland. SAIT also acknowledges all of the people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. Wherever you are today, thank you for pausing with us.
Thank you, Jenny. As always, very well done. And I know the Oilers do a tremendous job of their pre-game land recognition as well. I think one of the better ones that I've seen in the league. But we are very honored today to be joined by Kevin Lowe, 6-time Stanley Cup champion, past player, captain, coach, manager, president of hockey operations with the Edmonton Oilers, amongst many other things that he's accomplished in his career. And Kevin, you are the third of a triple header for us, in which we've had the CEO of one of Canada's oldest companies, Wajax, actually older than Canada itself. Erin Corbett joined us from West Island College, and she runs a tremendous school down here in Calgary, and a classically trained opera singer as well. So we're not going to put you to the singing test today, but we're very much looking forward to picking your brain on leadership. And as we start all of these conversations, I guess the first question we have coming out of the gate for you is, what does leading beyond any title mean to you?
Oh my goodness. It goes back to my family upbringing. I mean, if I really get into how I was able to achieve what I did, it's all based on the the support and encouragement I had around not only my father. A little background on our family. My father was 9 in his family, and we all lived in the same town. My dad and his family operated a business called Lowe's Dairy in Lachute, Quebec, and I was one of 36 in my generation. So you get a feeling for how big of a family it was. And there was always great encouragement in terms of leadership, et cetera, et cetera. But we learned at a young age that everyone participated. I had my first job at 5 years old. I picked up garbage, and then moved up the ladder in management within the dairy business before I got into hockey. But I guess to get to your answer is really, I was just immersed in it right from the get-go, and learned about leadership. I'm not sure if that answers this question specifically, but that's what jumps out at me.
That's fantastic. One of 36. So you guys certainly had a hockey team in and of itself. But Jenny, over to you. What did Kevin trigger for you there?
I think straight off we're right into that idea of how early the notion of team starts. And it's curious because we often talk about our work family and our home family. And I always quaver as to whether I think that's a good idea or not. But that support and that encouragement as well. And I think for leaders everywhere, that support and that encouragement is crucial. With all the different journeys that we take. And Kevin, when we look at every journey that you've been through, I don't know how it would be possible without that support and that encouragement, and then passing it on to the people who are working with or for you. And so I wonder, let's dig into for a leader, and what we have in our audience, we've got a lot of hockey fans in our audience, let's be fair here, but we've got a lot of people looking to up their leadership game too. And that encouragement, did you find yourself bringing that straight in when you were working with your teams? It comes naturally, or are there times where you had to remember to dig deep, that that's something that you have to build into your culture? Like, does it happen organically for you, or was it intentional work?
Yeah, good question. And often, and I always found that interesting in my post-playing career, into my management days, when people would ask about, how do you create a team? How do you work with one another? For me, it was very organically, because, as I mentioned, it started at a very young age. And by the way, I was the third youngest of that 36 generation. So I had all this incredible, growth and leadership ahead of me. Just an amazing upbringing. But in terms of the leadership, I'd get asked, how do you become a team? Well, in first of all, in pro sports, in hockey was my sport. You have to become a team. You have to you spend so much time together. In business, the challenge is, you're at work from 9 to 5, 8 to 4, whatever it is, and then everybody goes home to their families. In pro sports, we spend days and weeks together away from the family, so you're together all the time. And if you don't, first of all, have a collaborative style and enjoyment and a respect amongst one another, then you're doomed. I mean, that's a failed team right from the get-go. But the ones that have great success are the ones that recognize that part is important. The collaborative, working together, spending time together. What I tried to do and we did very well at Oilers Entertainment Group, because we had good leaders, was to really make an effort to spend time with the staff. And so that's out of the office, a lot of, just time to go out and have a drink, or whether it's at work. There's lots of, the sports influence comes into the business influence. And maybe I'll stop for a second and talk about how a sports organization works. I mean, you have the hockey operation and you have the business operation, and the hockey operation has its org chart to the leadership, and on downwards, and then the business operation has the same. They're responsible to generate revenue, to pay the players, to put the product on the ice. And sometimes they weren't always collaborative because of two distinct parts of the company. But we really tried to bring, the positive traits of the hockey operation into the business side, and that's spending time together.
Right. And it's fascinating to me. Like, I played competitive sport a long time ago, and our kids are all fully immersed. We were a couple in the basketball culture and one in the other hockey game that we talked about yesterday, field hockey, anyone who's never heard of it. But it's interesting how you build that, in the game, in the sports game, we think of the bench, and you can often tell a really good team by what's going on the bench. And when somebody scores, it's not necessarily the goal. I mean, it's always about the goal, but it's what happens next. Who did they appreciate on the way to that goal? Who did they recognize? And we see the same in business as well. We get some great results, but how did we get there, and how have we supported each other on the way? So I think that's really interesting that the two do play into each other, and it is that timepiece where we get that connection that helps to build that culture within it.
On that note, I played on arguably the greatest team of all time in the history of the NHL. It was voted by the fans a number of years ago in the NHL's 100th anniversary that the 1985 Edmonton Oilers were the greatest team in NHL history. We had some of the greatest players. For those that aren't hockey fans, Wayne Gretzky, number one, Mark Messier, many NHL Hall of Famers. But the trait that, one of the reasons why we had success was we spent a lot of time together. We had a great deal of respect for one another. But the leadership, the stars of the team, Gretzky and Messier were the first to congratulate and honor and support the teammates. Wayne Gretzky would score 8 points in a game, and the media would come to him. The first thing he would say, they'd ask him, well, what do you think of your game? And he wouldn't even talk about himself. He would talk about the other players. This player did this and this player did that. And that was consistent. It wasn't phony. It was from his heart. So he endeared his teammates, and that just worked on down the line.
Yeah, to be able to give people credit where it's due is it's easy, and yet it doesn't happen all the time. But when we see that consistency, that really bolsters any team that are working together.
There's something about. Oh, go ahead, Kevin.
And just on the previous thought, I wanted to touch on another example. Leadership is not easy, and it takes repetition and practice and consistent effort in what you're doing. For me, I had a collaborative management style. I think my number one trait I would hope people would say about me would be my integrity. Hard work is in there, whether that's a management style or not. But I'll give one example of, we had a young star on the team a number of years ago, not Connor McDavid, for those wondering, who we were trying to mold into be a leader. He came from a family that he was an only child, and not that this indicates that someone's going to be like this, but there appeared to be a lot of selfishness in the person, good family, but didn't have many leadership qualities. So we were trying to help this player out with leadership qualities, and he really he didn't understand how to be a leader. And he said, well, give me some examples. And so we said, well, okay, you've played the game the night before. It's been a hard game. The team lost. You come to the arena the next day for practice. It's very important that you come in with a positive attitude, that you display a sense of confidence about yourself, or just in general, happy to be in the dressing room. Yeah, it always sucks to lose, but you got to come with a good attitude the next day to work. Well, how do I do that? Well, you come to work and you say hi to everybody, because he typically would come in and have his head down, he'd walk in and just get his equipment on and go on the ice and really not, kind of mope around because he wasn't half awake. And he would say, I got to say hi to everybody. And yeah, that's important. And you say hi to the trainer and hi to the players and how are you today, and just have communication. And he really found that he thought that was a big stretch, that he had to do that in the morning. And he said, that's important. That's very important to be a leader, to come to work the next day with a good attitude.
There's so many directions to go here, Kevin, around, humble leadership, or the ability to, teach others the pieces of leadership there. That one I find fascinating. And so what I'm curious about, if you go back, and I promised I wasn't going to make this about hockey or bring up the glory days, but you did it first. So I'm okay with that. And I'm curious. So when you first came into the league, and I just want to think about who passed those, not necessarily focus on the who, but what were the lessons the others passed on to you? And then when you got into that dressing room and were growing into that leadership role, this is like a two-part question. So what was passed on to you? And then how do you, as a leadership group, figure out how you're going to lead that team together?
Yeah, that I'm glad you asked that question, because that's really important to the foundation of the success of the Oilers. For I would say 80s, 90s, for sure. Once that's ingrained in the foundation of an organization, it stays a long time. But you have to work at it. And I would say we're very fortunate. So again, a little background on me and the Edmonton Oilers. I started in 1979 with the Oilers. That was the very first year that the Oilers entered the National Hockey League. I started with Mark Messier and Wayne Gretzky. We all we were rookies in the NHL. The Oilers were a new team, we're an expansion team. And part of the deal is that the NHL allows the expansion teams to pick players off the pre-existing teams to begin the basis of an organization. We're very fortunate to have some great leaders, not necessarily great hockey players, but great leaders. They're probably a lot of them mostly average hockey players, but Lee Foglin is one that is very well known by Oiler fans. Colin Campbell works for the National Hockey League today. He's in charge of all NHL on ice. He's the on ice department guy. He's next, he's one of the top guys in the NHL. Ron Chipperfield, a number of names, a lot of names that people won't know, but these guys had a lot of integrity. They had good work ethic. They had good integrity. They were great role models for us. We're coming in we have no idea what being a professional athlete is. We just all graduated from junior hockey into the National Hockey League. And so here we are. We might not have been so fortunate if and I've been around players that aren't like that are very selfish, and these players were selfless, and so that's how we got to start. Now, if we had been around selfish leadership, would we have still been who we were? Probably not, because I think we all, as I said, I think I had a pretty good foundation. I certainly knew what was right and wrong, but it was a great start for us to have, like I say, to have this selfless, hardworking, inspirational group of people leading the way. We quickly took over. It only took a couple of years for most of those players were out of the organization, and we were running the show. But we also showed the respect of their veteran leadership, that we allowed them their time to demonstrate what leadership is, and then eventually we took over.
And that's really cool. And I'm dating myself, but I remember a lot of those names as well too. The thing I found interesting is you and I chatted yesterday ahead of today, because one of the things I wanted to lean into a little bit with you here is how leadership changes and develops over the course of a career as a leader goes through different roles, right? So let's go through your journey. You started as a player, and if I'm not mistaken, very first draft pick for the Edmonton Oilers as well, and scored the very first goal. So there we go. I've got my history out. But from player to captain to coach to general manager to president of hockey ops, and you shared a very interesting story about leaving the Oilers to the Rangers and then coming back, and what that leadership role was like for you there. And can you just speak to how a leader needs to adjust their leadership style and skill set through their career? Now, not everybody's going to have the same multitude of roles that you've had, but clearly you've had to adapt as you go forward. And I think that's a really interesting aspect of your story.
Yeah. Two examples, I guess, and we touched a little bit of this on yesterday. I forgot to mention. So I played 13 years for the Oilers, and then it was time to move on to a new challenge. And I asked to be traded. All the players that I grew up with in glory years had gone on to other teams and new experiences, and I was ready for that. So I eventually got traded to the New York Rangers, and again there was a lot expected of me coming in. The Rangers hadn't won a Stanley Cup in 54 years, and Mark Messier was already there. He was the captain and the leader, and they were bringing me in for additional leadership. But I didn't roll into New York City and join the Rangers and immediately become, okay, I'm here, I'm the leader. For me, and very similar to when I went back to Edmonton, I'll touch on that, was you gain the respect of your coworkers by doing and not saying. And so it's how you behave, how you show up in the morning and say hi to everyone, and how you have a positive attitude in sports. Obviously, the hardest worker. Again, back to the glory years of the Oilers, you know, Gretzky and Messier, and I include myself in there, we are the hardest working players on the ice. We tried to be. So it was always a competition of who would work hardest. And that allowed us to continue on. But getting back to, you know, going to New York, it was, you know, you don't try to roll into an organization and immediately try to, and I've seen that. I've seen managers come in and try to, okay, I'm the manager and this is how we're doing things. You know, my style was, you know, just to, I guess, kill them with kindness, kill them with hard work, kill them with repetitive, positive sort of attention to what the task is at hand. In our case was hockey. The other one was when I went back to Edmonton. I was coming back. The Oilers hadn't made the playoffs. I left for 4 years. They never made the playoffs, and I came back and they made the playoffs the next 2 years. So I never missed the playoffs as a player with the Oilers. The Oilers made the playoffs 15 of their first 19 years, and I happened to be in the lineup. And that sounds like boasting. It's more coincidence, but the Oilers had built a good young nucleus of players, and Glenn Sather was the general manager, longtime general manager, and he had brought a couple older guys back to try to influence the young group, and it wasn't successful. It was considered a failed attempt, and so when they brought me back, obviously I knew this. I knew that those veteran players had come back and really tried to push their leadership style on a young group that was ready to grow as a team. So I mean, I came in, I did the exact opposite. I mean, there was even reports in the newspaper that they were going to make me captain because I used to be a captain. They already had the captain of the team who was a young guy and a great leader, and that alone, just, you know, before I even arrived, the players of the team were like, okay, what's going on? Why is this guy coming back? You know, he's long in the tooth. He's not going to be our guy. And I did the exact opposite. I said I didn't want a letter. I didn't want to be an assistant. I wanted to come in and just fit in and be a part of the team. And I did that consistently for, you know, months on end. And the players eventually confided and said, you know, we're fearful when you were coming here because, you know, some of your previous colleagues had come back and tried to be too much of a leader, and you came back and just fit in the way just the right amount that we needed. And I thought, I mean, that was just my gut feeling, and it certainly worked out. And then indirectly, I could be a leader in how I behaved in terms of respecting the hierarchy already there. Hey, and if things are going great and the team developed, that's the ultimate goal. And the number one thing to remember in leadership is you know, you should never be worried about who gets the credit if you're truly in a team environment, because at the end of the day, everybody reaps the benefits.
Mm-hmm. And so much of what we talk about often on Fridays is leadership is a behavior, not necessarily a role. And so understanding that really allows you to play your role. Like, you're still contributing that leadership, whatever the title is there, the opportunity is still there as well. I want to go back to just one thing, but we have a really good question from one of our attendees. So that will be my actual question, but just for everybody, in case they missed it, Kevin's kill them with kindness, kill them with this, and this. But what I really liked in there that was included, and that's worthy of any leader hearing, is the attention to the task in hand. And so often when we're talking about culture and we're talking about building that positive environment, we get the balance a little bit. It gets tricky and people forget the task at hand. That's the job. That's the part that we're doing. So I love that came into that explanation. The question that we have from somebody in our audience this morning is, how have you seen diversity, equity, and inclusion evolve over the course of your leadership journey? I mean, we've seen a massive change in the last 5 years in the business place, but really the last 10 to 15 years, and in a career your length. there must be some significant changes there.
Yes, no, I've been out of active management for some years now, but certainly around the Oilers organization. And I mean, I think it's wonderful in terms of diversity. We were the first team before I became the manager of the Oilers, but in my time as well, where we had I think at one point we had 6 Black players playing for the Oilers, and for me it was never it was never a thing. It was just, they're the best players. It's not because they're Black. It's they're just the best players. And over the years we had, not so much on the diversity side, but just in differing personalities. Again, the one great thing about the Oilers and their success was we're very accepting of any personality. Whatever you did off the ice, that's your gig. As long as you came to the rink and contributed to the success of the organization, however you did it. That wasn't always the case in professional sports organizations. You know, leadership could be opposed to differing views. That's not the way we do it. I mean, I'm kind of rambling a bit here, but I don't want to name specific players, but we had players for the organization that were cast-offs from other teams. They had an obvious talent, but their personality or their behavior in and around the rink or whatever was not accepted. And we were able to bring them into our fold and accept them for what they were. And because we knew at the end of the day that they would be a real asset to the overall success of the organization. So again, in the province of Quebec, we're talking 45, 50 years ago when I was a kid. You know, we were a very white country, but in Quebec there was language differences. Mm-hmm. You know, there was French and English, and there was definitely in the late 60s and 70s there was confrontation. I never understood that. I grew up in an environment I could speak both languages. We're no different just because we speak different languages, but we had friends and neighbors that were against the French people. I grew up in an English-speaking family, but against the French people. I never did understand it. And we fast forwarded today. You know, if a woman or a person of color joins the organization, you know, we're a team, right? And we saw a lot of that. I see a lot of, you know, in terms of females joining sports now, professional sports organizations, men's organizations, that is. I think it's wonderful. I have 3 daughters. And again, at the end of the day, it's the acceptance of what ultimately is going to make the organization, more successful.
Yeah. And not to make light of the inclusion issue, but I'm not sure Flames fans and Oilers fans will ever coexist in the same room, but we'll move on from there. But no, all seriousness, I think the NHL's done a really tremendous job the last few years, especially around Pride nights, et cetera. A little bit of controversy this past year. I think it'll be interesting to see how the league works through that. But it certainly has changed, right? I think if you look down to Seattle, I believe isn't Cami Granato now an assistant manager down there? So, the league has made some big strides from where it was back in 1979. But Kevin, another interesting question here, and this speaks to collaboration and gets into the business versus hockey side. A team changes every year. And I think it's probably more prevalent in sport, hockey in particular, where every year you've got new players in the dressing room, new players on the bench. The question here is, can you kind of dig into how the business side and the hockey side collaborate together to lead for success, right? There's, for example, the question just mentions, there's lots of emotions with trades, retirements, signings, etc. The hockey operation is going about its job to build the best product for the ice. The business side is trying to figure out how to promote that. I'm sure there's conflict in there at times. I don't know if you can speak to kind of that conflict collaboration piece.
It's a very interesting dynamic. It was one of my biggest source of frustration was because I saw both sides, and I saw the players are the number one asset of the organization. I'll give you an example. If you have the ticketing arm of a hockey operation, the business operation, you have the sponsorship, if we're talking revenue, you got tickets, you have sponsorship, and then you have television. Those are the three pillars of generating 150 million a year to pay 125 of it to the players. And it's so easy when you can deliver a player. If you could bring a player in on every sales pitch to a sponsor, you're probably getting the deal done. And also, if the team's winning, it's a lot easier to sell tickets, season tickets, game day tickets. But the demand on the players, the physical demand that they have at the rink every day is, they work extremely hard. They treat their bodies like high performance racing cars, where they're finely tuned in terms of even the nutrition they get today is all based on their body style. Input output, whatever you put in your body is obviously gonna. And you got to understand, these are elite athletes that are just trying to get this measure of jump on the opposition. So they're really busy. They've got a lot of but the business side is always can we have Connor? Can we have Leon? Can we have Darnell Nurse? Can we have? And so there's this fine balance of, and then the players have their own lives. They work, they travel, they have families. They're getting pulled in a million different directions, and they need the rest, probably most importantly. So it's how do you balance all that? How do you appease the business staff by saying the players are doing their part? And I think our players do a really good job. Most teams now, it's a big business, and the players make a lot of money, and so it's important that the players recognize that they do need to do more for the organization than just go out on the ice and score goals. Connor McDavid understands. We have internal autograph sessions, which collects memorabilia that is either that used for sponsorship or fans or for our foundation. So, once a month the players will come in and everybody will have to sign a couple hundred pieces, and they're doing that all the time. Anywhere Connor McDavid goes, he's being asked for an autograph, and it's not always easy to say yes, because it can be a bit of a pain in the butt to the good thing about cameras nowadays is people say, hey, can we do a selfie? And so they do the selfie, and then they say, can I get your autograph? And we say, well, you just got a picture of me. What do you need my autograph for? Kind of thing. But I'm rambling a bit here, but I'm just trying to. So the organization, the business side, as I mentioned, they if they could just have the players all the time, it'd make their job so much easier. But that's not always the case.
Yeah. So you just mentioned something interesting there that I wanted to dig in, because we touched on resilience yesterday when we were chatting. And a couple of things that stand out to me. So if we go back and we think about resiliency through your career, we can go back to the Miracle on Manchester. We can go back to Steve Smith. We can go back to you led the team to the Cup final the year after the lockout, to then enter
the decade of darkness. Go ahead.
I wasn't going to say it. All right, but can you speak to that and just the skill set that it takes to battle through resilience, to battle through high expectations? Like, there had to be times where, you know, in the decade there, perhaps you thought, yeah, heck with it, I'm done. But, you know, like the theme of resiliency, I think just rings so strong as well. So I'm curious as to get your thoughts there.
Well, I'm certainly not a quitter, but if we're talking about leadership, I would say when I was challenged the most in my professional career would have been when I was in management, and there was some really tough days. There was a lot of I became president of hockey operations, and the team wasn't doing well for many years. We decided we made a business decision to rebuild, and anyone knows that term in sports and professional sports, you're basically breaking it all down and starting over again, and that can take time. And in the Oilers' case, it took a long time. The premise of rebuilding is that you're going to get a high draft pick, and the models for us when we made the decision was the Chicago Blackhawks and probably most notable the Pittsburgh Penguins, because they did the same thing, not by design, but it ended up, you know, working out for them. But the premise behind rebuilding is that you'll get high draft picks, and those draft picks will be stars. In our case, our high draft picks weren't stars; they were good players. We didn't really get a star until we got Connor McDavid, and then all of a sudden, lo and behold, the Oilers are, you know, a cup contender, I guess. But for me, going back to those years, leadership style was our owner. Our owner, Daryl Cates, showed amazing leadership and support to me. Many a times throughout that period, I was ready to throw myself on my sword and say, okay, off with my head, because that's what happens in sports, right? You get rid of the leadership and you demonstrate to the fans, okay, we're turning the page and we've got someone smarter or harder working or whatever, which is
different.
But it's a funny dynamic, right, in professional sports. I mean, you've seen it in Toronto and all these teams that they get rid of management or the coach and they start over, and the fans are satisfied. So I was prepared to throw myself on my sword, but our owner wouldn't allow me to, because he said, this is a process. It's not, you know, there's no template for when, other than, you know, hard work and you know, diligent effort at trying to build something back up. But there's no timeline on this thing, and you're not any less smart today than you were 6 years ago when you had the team in the Stanley Cup Finals. So, you know, why do you want to quit? Why do you want to leave? Well, I didn't necessarily want to quit, but I felt it was the right thing to do for the organization to give it some peace amongst its fan base. But so, I mean, that's where, if anybody on this call today gets to the point where they're running a big organization or owning a big company, you know, keep that in mind, is that the easy thing is to get rid of the management, but the hard thing to do is to stay committed to them. And for that, he's had a loyal employee for well, I've been there for probably 15 years since, still employed by the Oilers, and so what I do now for everybody is that I'm an ambassador. I'm a paid ambassador. So I shake hands and kiss babies, but I you know, for me, every moment I meet a fan, whether it's at Rogers Place or on the street, I keep in mind that I'm representing the game of hockey, and in our case, the Edmonton Oilers, and I want them to have a positive moment with someone who's been in the business for so long.
I think it's curious, you know, I've heard the phrase the dark ages and the dark times, and it was a long time, and yet I wonder if, you know, there's an awful lot of people looking in on something that they really don't know, And so as you go through those seasons with those players, you still have that team, you still have that culture. And we get very wrapped up, those who are familiar with Simon Sinek, we get very wrapped up on the game, the score. And actually to be involved in the process, yes, exhausting for a lot of leaders. And there's still that culture piece building. And I think, you know, what we've heard from you is how important the integrity, the leadership, the positive part is, the focusing on the task. And so I think it's curious to hear that from the inside point. And for leaders listening, yes, there are days where we just want to say, no, take me out. This is the best thing. But often it is that stability and that consistency that helps us to get to the end. And it is the I don't know, is it a patience? It does change, but it wouldn't change if we didn't have that foundation underneath it. And so the foundation is key in that culture part within there. And I just wonder if those who had been around and part of the culture had a different story than what we always hear on the absolute outside.
It very much so. The human part, the human, the relationships, you work at those, you nurture those. And so it just doesn't end because of one hiccup,
yeah,
or a series of hiccups, because you've built it. I mean, it's like a marriage, you know, when you say I do, it's not I hope, or I'm going to try. It's I do, I'm in it.
Yeah, yeah. And to that point too, we talk about this a lot in performance management, is that that relationship is absolutely crucial, because when we have the integrity, you can hold me accountable, we can keep moving, but that conversation is all the time. Nobody runs a marriage on a once a year conversation, or you're not very good, get out. And when we're working week to week to week to week, it's such a different process and a different build, and that just strengthens everything for the team as it shifts and lifts itself to the next level and to the next level. It's very cool.
Jenny, my wife, often refers to our anniversary as my performance appraisal date. So,
well, you're still there.
Kevin, I hate to say this, but we gotten to the point where we've got to get onto our kind of our quick fire conclusion. We haven't even touched on the Olympics. We haven't touched on so many other things. And I just want to thank you so much for your time and generosity of your time this morning, and some great lessons and stories. So Jenny, why don't you go with our first quick fire question here to wrap up. We say quick fire, you're free to take as much time as you want to answer them, Kevin. So okay. These aren't yes, no questions.
Yeah, and this one is a curious one for someone with such a leadership tenure. I think I read, when you said to us you had your first job when you were 5, and I think I read something that you were a captain first at 13. So, you know, the question that we ask is, where were you as a leader? Where are you today? And where are you heading next as a leader?
Good question. Where was I? I don't know if I gave the example. So I talked about growing up in Quebec and the French English thing. As a young person, I was the captain of the hockey team, and I didn't speak French very well. And my father, part of the responsibility of my father was manager of the team, so it was to let the players know when practice would be, and so he wanted me to make the calls, and some of the players only spoke French. I said, well, Dad, he said, no, I'm going to teach you how to say it, and it was really embarrassing. It felt embarrassing for me. I didn't really want to do it, and he convinced me that just try it. And so I did it, and I felt, I felt it was an awkward moment for a young person to have to, bonjour Simon, le pratique demain c'est à 8 heures dans le soir. My French is still not very good, but it's better now than it was. And the learning I got from that was, afterwards, those players, as we grew up, said to me they were so impressed that I made the effort to speak French to them. So that's, so the question is, where was I, where I am now, and where am I going?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as I told you, I'm still an Oilers ambassador. So, I mean, that's the leadership part. Where do I want to go? I think I'll continue doing what I'm doing as long as they keep asking me to do it, and I think, I mean, hockey is, I would like to have done other things. I will get frustrated with politics, and I've been asked to go into politics many times. And, hockey's an aggressive sport. Politics is a blood sport, I think. And, but I just think I'm involved in a lot of organizations, I know this is quick fire. I'll finish my answer, but I think it's really important. The number one lesson I learned was to give back. And so I've continued to do that. I'm on a lot of foundations, charity organizations, and that's where I'm going.
Thank you.
Although, Kevin, I think if you do get into politics, we should get you and Mr. Burke on a joint ticket so we can finally see how that goes. What are the 3 non-negotiable behaviors that you and the folks on your team need to buy into?
Yeah, I think, I mean, respect would be always the number one in pro sports. Respect for the organization, respect for the jersey, and work ethic is non-negotiable. And I guess commitment. I mean, it's professional sports is not easy, and you got to have complete buy-in. And but again, as I said, we wouldn't ostracize or give up. You try to work with those people to get to that point, but if not everybody's on the same page and putting the same kind of work in, you can't have success. So, and we're fortunate to have so much success. We knew what the formula is, and if we don't have complete buy-in on that, then you're not going to be successful.
Makes sense. One last one. So for everybody who is here this morning, and thank you again to all of you who have joined us, if you could offer one piece of advice, one piece of leadership advice for anyone who maybe they have the role as a leader, maybe they just want to invest in the learnings from you, what would your advice be for leadership?
Always remember the 6 Ps. Anybody know what the 6 Ps are?
We're going to hand it all over to you.
Yeah, I was going to say product, promotion, and price, but that's marketing. So
proper preparation prevents piss poor performance.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Kevin, respect, work ethic, commitment, and the 6 Ps. You shared some great stuff with us today, and thank you so much for making the time. Again, I truly appreciate it. We didn't prep you for this before we started because we started so abruptly with, we were ducks paddling frantically under the water, folks, getting a couple tech issues sorted out at the top of the hour. But when we finish here, Kevin, it's going to be an abrupt ending and a very sharp goodbye as I end the call. So I just want to thank you again for your generosity of time. And Jenny, as always, I appreciate you. Kevin, thank you so much. Jenny, any final thoughts before we let Kevin say goodbye?
Nope, I'll simply join in all the thank yous. We always learn, and I learned a lot this morning too. So thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Greg.
Awesome. Anyway, have a fantastic weekend and go enjoy that Edmonton sunshine, Kevin and Jenny. We'll talk to you very soon. Have a great weekend, everybody. Take care.